Hello, Internet. This is an even weirder move. Kicking off a series of board game and card game reviews. The first game that I'm going to be reviewing is Koi Pond by Daniel Solis, a print-on-demand game available at drivethroughcards.com. So Koi Pond is sort of a filler weight game. It's got a lot of similarities to traditional card games. You're drawing cards and playing them down in sets, but it's got an interesting set of scoring mechanisms that keep things feeling fresh. You have to balance the cards that are played in front of you with the cards in your hand because you're going to score the lower of those two point values at the end of the round. And while you're discarding cards throughout the round to try to keep those things in balance, the cards that you discard are also worth points in the form of victory ribbons. Additionally, in the next round, all of the discarded cards go into the middle where they can be drafted from by other players, so keeping track of what you discard is also important. I'll give you a shorter review of the gameplay, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what I think of this game. Alright, so here we have sort of the setup for Koi Pond. This is actually the second round setup because in the first round, this big heap of cards that's here in the middle of the lake is going to be empty. Now the game doesn't come with printed rules, but it does come with these nice reminder cards here, which tell you all of the zones in the game that you need to keep track of. So, you have the house, which is your hand. You have the pond, which is the cards that are played in front of you as part of your tableau. You have the river, which is sideways and basically is your discard pile, although there's a little bit more to it than that. You have the lake, which is all of the cards here in the middle, and the deck, which is the deck. So the game's played over 3 rounds, and each round consists of 6 sort of turns, or phases, I guess. Each one of those turns is going to be split into some parts. So first, in turn order, each player is going to go around selecting cards until each of us has selected 3 cards. We can choose to take the top card of the deck if we want to do that, or we can look through the lake here and pick one of those cards. We're going to do that until each player has selected 3 cards. Once each player has picked their 3 cards, they're going to play one face down to their pond and one face down to their river, and they're going to keep the other one in their house. After everyone's selected those, we reveal them and start another turn where we each select 3 more cards. But on the second turn, we're going to have an additional card in our hand to start with, the one that we kept from last round. So we'll select 3 more cards. And then from these, including the one we picked last round, choose to play one to our house or to our pond and one to play to our river. We're going to keep doing that until there are 6 cards in each area. So 6 of those turns in a round. Then at the end of the round, we're going to do scoring. So the scoring mechanism in this is really interesting. Let me set up here real quick for a full round to show you how the scoring would work. Alright, so at the end of one of those rounds, we're going to have 6 cards in each of our 3 areas. I'll have 6 cards in hand in my house, 6 cards in my pond, and 6 cards in my discard. And the way scoring works between the house and the pond is based on trying to keep balance between those 2 areas. So I have 4 blue here in my pond, and when I look at my hand, I have 3 blue. So I'm only going to be able to score 3 points because I score the lower of those 2 numbers. So I'd score 3 points there. Here I have 3 red, and I have a hybrid fish here that I chose to be red when I played it. And you have to choose which color it is when you play it, and you can't switch it except under some special circumstances. I also have 3 red in my hand, so I'd score 3 points there as well. I have 1 yellow in my pond and 5 yellow in my hand, so that was a little bit of a waste. So I'm only going to score 1 point for that, despite having so many cards of that color. And I have no white in my pond, but 2 white in my hand, and again, so those points are squandered. There's another type of card here that's not a fish. As you can see, this is clearly not a fish. There's 3 different types of animal cards, and the way that these work is they score points based off of what your opponents are doing. So, for example, this yellow cat, if he's in my pond, I'm going to score 1 point for every yellow fish that's in an opponent's house. And based on which round of the game this is, the opponent that's targeted will be different. There are also turtles, which score for the fish in your opponent's rivers, and cranes, which score for the fish in your opponent's ponds. None of those cards do anything if they're not played into your pond, so it's a good idea probably to play them. At this point, all of the cards that were played in each person's pawned and kept in each person's hand are going to be shuffled up and placed on the bottom of the deck. Then, all of the cards that were put in the river over the course of that round are going to be dealt with. And this is where something really interesting happens. So let's say that I put 4 white in my river, and that was the most white fish that anyone had put in their river. Only fish count for this, so if I throw this guy in there, he doesn't count for anything. Whoever puts the most fish of a given color into the river in a round is going to be awarded one of these ribbons. And these ribbons become more valuable the more of them that you get. So if no one else is paying attention to what they're putting in the river, you might be able to get a significant number of points this way. These ribbons are worth 1 if you have 1 ribbon, 4 if you have 2 ribbons of that color, and 9 if you have 3 ribbons of that color. So you can get a decent chunk of points that way. Then, all of the cards that people put in the rivers are going to flow into the lake and can be selected from next round. At the end of 3 of these rounds, whoever has the most points is going to be the winner. So that's Koi Pond, a koi card game. So this is a really, really good filler weight game, which has the advantage of feeling a lot like a traditional card game without being too traditional or too mundane. So this is an advantage because compared to something like Fairy Tale, which is another drafting filler game that I like a lot, it's easy to learn because the things that you're doing are a lot more familiar. You're collecting sets of cards in a suit and you want more of them, and then you're choosing one to play and one to discard, which feels a lot like a lot of different traditional games. Whereas in Fairy Tale, there's a whole bunch of set collection mechanisms which aren't actually that different, but because of the way the game is laid out, they feel really different. Additionally, this game has a really, really gorgeous aesthetic, which I didn't really mention when I was showing you the cards. Let me grab a couple of them so I can actually show you. Yeah, so the cards are really, really beautiful, and they convey the information that they're supposed to really well, which helps get people into the game because it doesn't look like it's super, super complicated, which even though maybe a game like Biblios or Fairy Tale is not a lot more complicated than this game, they look more complicated, and as a filler, that can be bad. Because it makes the game a little bit harder to teach. People are a little bit more uncertain if they understand what you're doing. So the game has that very traditional card game feel to it, like I said, but it has a lot of innovative or twists on those mechanics that make it less straightforward. For example, the scoring mechanism where you have to keep what's in your hand balanced with what's on the table, and it's not always known to other players what's in your hand because you could have drawn cards secretly, so people might not know how able to score the stuff that's in front of you are. That can be especially useful if somebody's playing one of the animal cards versus you. You can kind of bait them, I guess, into committing to that. The other thing is the discard pile being something that's scored is really, really cool. It does have a little bit of a downside to it, which is that the first round that somebody that's new plays the game, they will probably disregard that. And after one round, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I can get a lot of points from those ribbons doing that." But it's something you kind of have to pick up on through the play, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's something to know. So the third thing that this game does very well, in my opinion, is that the game flows really well. It's got a very elegant structure of play to it. You are doing this very cyclical thing, drawing 3 more cards, distributing them, drawing 3 more and distributing them, and then at the end of that there's that scoring, which it feels very nice and like fluid. The only part that I would say does not is if you get into a situation where multiple players are contesting majorities in the river and they're using hybrid fish to get those majorities, you're going to end up in a situation where maybe I have a red-blue fish and I'm trying to challenge you for the red majority, and you have a red-yellow fish, and you're trying to use that to challenge the yellow majority, but if you made it red instead, then you would beat me, but then I could make my red blue, and I would beat you for blue. And the rules have a way of resolving those kinds of situations, but just compared with the rest of the game, it's kind of fiddly or clunky compared to the rest of it. It's not something that's so bad that it really hurts the game, it's just that it can make those scoring phases take a little bit longer then I would really like them to. So, long story short, right now this is kind of my go-to filler game. It was maybe Fairy Tail or Biblios before this, but Fairy Tail's a bit harder to teach to new people, and that's kind of where a lot of my gaming gets done. And Biblios, I've just played the hell out of, maybe. So this is kind of beating out those two games right now, but I would definitely put it in the same category with those games. And so if that's the type of thing you're looking for, I would definitely suggest checking out Koi Pond on DriveThruCards.com. There are a couple of neat ideas of expansions that are on there, but I haven't checked any of those out yet, so if I do that, I will get back to you with what I think of those. Until next time, this is An Even Weirder Move.